Hello and welcome to Barbara's podcast. This is the show for women, all about health, nutrition, and wellness. It's the show that will empower you and inspire you to create a healthier lifestyle.
Hello and welcome. I'm Barbara Karafocus, and today I have a very special guest, Sue, who is a sugar-free coach. She empowers people to break their addiction to sugar. So welcome, Sue.
Thank you, Barbara. It's nice to be here.
Can you tell us about your background and how you became the sugar-free coach?
Yeah, so I've actually been in the wellness industry for 20 years in March of this year. So I'm quite proud of that. But I basically was a personal trainer before I became a nutritional therapist. And the reason why I became a nutritional therapist was because I had my own kind of health issues back in 2009, sorry. I had a knee infection that led to about 25 days of very high dose antibiotics, which basically left my intestine and my gut microbiome kind of not functioning efficiently at all. And fast forward about 3 years, when I was working with clients, I was having to take a sleep in the afternoon because I was exhausted all the time. I was eating rubbish just to try and keep me going, just to try and keep my energies up. And I wasn't really walking the talk. I wasn't walking the talk for my clients. I wasn't there for my family. And I knew I needed to do something about it. So I went to see my own nutritional therapist, and we went down a journey of healing my intestine, but gradually started to realize just how much of an impact sugar was having on my energy levels on a day-to-day basis, on my sleep pattern, on my menopause or my perimenopause as it was at that stage. And just realized that that was the thing that I needed to, more than anything, remove. I'd been using sugar to kind of boost my energies as a personal trainer, and it wasn't working for me. So I retrained as a nutritional therapist. I created a program for myself that I could follow on a daily basis. And now that was to remove sugar. And now I work with clients to help them understand how easy it is to remove sugar and really to break that cycle of sugar consumption, so that we can live a full and energized life, feel more comfortable in our clothes, and just live life to the full, really.
How does sugar really impact our health?
So sugar is a really inflammatory food. When the process that the body goes through to break sugar down to create glucose in the body. So let's just clarify what sugar is first of all. Carbohydrate basically turns into glucose, and you've got different types of carbohydrate. You've got reds and greens and orange carbohydrate in the vegetable category and the fruit category, and then you've got what I call beige and white carbohydrate, which is your pasta, your bread, your cakes, your biscuits, your cookies, alcohol, that kind of thing. Now, the body functions on glucose, and all food groups essentially can be turned into glucose if the body can't access carbohydrates. We can use protein or we can use fat, we can turn it into glucose. But the process of turning carbohydrate into glucose creates substances that can basically cause inflammation in the body. Now, if we're consuming carbohydrates in the reds, the greens, and the orange category, they contain substances called antioxidants that will neutralize those potentially inflammatory side effects. If we're getting our carbohydrate or glucose from beige and white carbohydrate, they don't contain those antioxidants that will neutralize those bad guys that are released as a result of the process of creating glucose in the body. And that then causes inflammation. Those bad guys are called free radicals. They attack healthy tissue and they start to create inflammation in the body. So sugar in its beige and white form is really inflammatory because we don't have those substances that will neutralize the bad guys and get rid of them out of the system. So we can still have just as much energy from eating our carbohydrates from the reds and the greens and the oranges as we would from beige and white carbohydrates. We just don't have the aging process. Essentially what happens is the body starts to heat up because the inflammation is heating the system up. It's speeding the aging process up. And it's starting to cause things like joint health. It might lead to brain fog. It might lead to menopause, increased menopause symptoms, all of those kind of things are a symptom of too much sugar in the system. Now,
heart disease.
Yeah, and heart disease. Yeah, because what happens is that inflammation stiffens the arteries and things like that, and that can have a knock-on effect to, and particularly for postmenopausal women, heart disease is a really important thing to be aware of. And if we're consuming all our carbohydrate from the beige and the white carbohydrate, we can be stiffening the arteries, we can be disrupting our gut microbiome, we cause more stress internally in the body. So we would then release a hormone called cortisol, and cortisol basically disrupts our hormone balance. There's so many things that sugar, if you put sugar in the middle and insulin in particular as the blood sugar hormone, the knock-on effect from that is huge. It's really huge right across the body. Just from, on the one end of the scale, joint pain and energy, to the other end of the scale, pre-diabetes, insulin resistance, diabetic, type 2 diabetic, heart disease, autoimmune conditions, all can be linked back to our sugar consumption.
And there are a number of definitions of sugar. There's at least 56. So which ones do you tell your clients to avoid?
Well, all sugar is sugar. So whenever we consume anything,
carob syrup, you've got honey, you've got maltose, dextrose, glucose, fructose.
Exactly. Yeah.
And the list goes on and on.
The important thing to understand is what happens when that sugar in any form hits our tongue, and what the metabolic response in the body is. So when we have something sweet, a message is sent to the pancreas to release insulin. Yes. And insulin is our blood sugar hormone. The message is sent, we're going to have some sugar, or something sweet is coming. Let's make sure that we've got the right hormones in place to be able to pick that sugar up and take it to the cells for energy production. So we release insulin, we consume whatever that is, and it includes sweetness as well. So the kind of diet drinks and all that kind of thing, there's no escape as far as the body releasing insulin is concerned. And insulin, depending on the concentration of the sugar and how quickly it can be converted into glucose, will have an impact on how quickly insulin is released into the system. So if insulin is released really quickly into the system and it picks up the sugar, or the glucose as it is by that stage, to take it to the cells for energy production, if there's too much, the cells then kind of start to shut down. The insulin receptors on the cells start to shut down. And they say, we don't need any more energy. We don't need any more sugar for energy production. The mitochondria use the glucose for energy production. If we're more sedentary, we don't need all that sugar. And so the insulin then has to remove the sugar from the bloodstream. And what it ends up doing is then removing it very quickly. As quickly as it was released, it removes it really quickly and takes it to the liver, where it stores it as glycogen, basically. So that can have an impact on liver function. But more importantly, what happens is as the insulin is removed from the system really quickly, we then have a blood sugar drop, or what we might know as a blood sugar crash. The symptoms of a blood sugar crash can be sort of shaking, brain fog, irritability, thirst. All those kind of things are signs that our blood sugars have dropped. And our brain then kicks in and says, actually, blood sugars have dropped. We need to eat some more. We need to eat some more glucose, or get some more glucose quickly into the system. And so then we eat more glucose in its refined form. We have another spike of insulin. And so this process carries on throughout the course of the day. A cycle, a blood sugar roller coaster, peaks and troughs of insulin throughout the day, where our cravings essentially are being controlled by what's happening as far as insulin is concerned. If insulin is high, we're not using that insulin, it will crash, and then we have cravings because we need to kind of bring our blood sugars back up. Insulin will go high again and drop again. We'll have another craving. And oftentimes when I work with clients, the first thing we do is focus on getting blood sugars balanced, because once we get that insulin balanced, that can really make you feel so much more energized, much more in control. You reduce the need for, the cravings reduce, and that makes us feel more empowered as well. Because sometimes I, again, work with clients where they'll say to me, I just can't control my cravings. I just can't seem to get them under control. And oftentimes that is a physiological response. Blood sugars are on a roller coaster.
Well, if someone did want to get off the roller coaster, what steps could they take? What would you recommend?
Well, the first thing to do is to think about what you're eating first thing in the morning. So the first thing we eat, our stomach is full of hydrochloric acid, and hydrochloric acid breaks down protein. It doesn't break down carbohydrate. So again, in 21st century life, we've been sold this message that cereal for breakfast, toast for breakfast, anything that's easy, anything that's fast, etc., etc. But all of these things are carbohydrate based. And so the hydrochloric acid will break the carbohydrate down really quickly and we'll have a massive glucose release into our bloodstream. So we'll have a blood sugar spike straight away, first thing in the morning. So if you're someone who gets hungry by about 10:30 after you've eaten your breakfast, that's because your blood sugars have spiked and then they've crashed again. And now our brain has kicked in and said we need to eat something. So if you eat a protein-based breakfast or a savory-based breakfast, that breaks down, the protein breaks down much more slowly in the stomach. And so the release of glucose into the bloodstream is a much slower release. And so therefore a much slower release of insulin. So really what we should be doing is being able to get from breakfast to lunch without needing to snack. If we can get from breakfast to lunch without needing to snack, that means that we know that our breakfast was right. It released insulin really slowly into the system. We didn't have a spike and a trough, and we can control all the other hormones as well around appetite and satiety. Those hormones are controlled as well if our insulin is really nicely balanced. So the first thing to work on is to focus on what breakfast can I eat that's going to get me from breakfast to lunch, because then I'll know that my blood sugars are really well balanced. And once we've got breakfast right, then we can start to look at some of the other things that we can do as well. There isn't a one size fits all when it comes to balancing our blood sugars. We have to understand what works for our body. Everybody's different. Everybody responds to foods in different ways. So if you can be looking at, some people might have porridge with seeds and nuts, for example, for breakfast, and that keeps them full for hours. The next person might have that, and they're hungry by 10:30. So everybody's different. Everybody metabolizes their glucose in different ways and at different rates. So if we have a protein-based breakfast or a savory-based breakfast that will keep us going from breakfast to lunch, that's the first step in getting our blood sugars balanced. And that's where I start with all of my clients. I say, right, we're only going to focus on breakfast. We're not going to worry about anything else at the minute. Let's just focus on breakfast and allowing us to get from one meal to the next. Then we can look at things like movement after you've eaten. A little bit of movement after you've eaten can really help to use up some of the insulin that is released when we've eating. And then also eating food in the right order, that makes a big difference as well. So you know, if you look at the kind of Mediterranean diet, particularly the Italians, for example, they will have a salad to start with, then they'll have their protein dish, and then they'll have their carbohydrate dish. Well, that's exactly the right order to eat food in if you want to keep your blood sugars balanced. You want to be having all the green fibrous vegetables first of all. That will kind of create almost a lining in the stomach. Then you have your protein, and then you have your carbohydrate, which might be your potatoes, might be your pasta, and what have you. So it's starting to get to think about, how can I eat the food in the right order? And someone asked me a question the other day. Often I'll do kind of like one pan meals where I cook everything.
My favorite.
Stir fry everything up. How do I divide all of that up? And I just said to them, well, just have a small salad to start with. Have a small salad before you have the rest of your meal. And that small salad can make all the difference to how the sugars are released into your bloodstream after your meal. Yeah. So some really simple things that aren't complicated we can do that will begin to get our blood sugars balanced. The first being making sure that breakfast is right and is the right breakfast for you, protein-based, savory-based ideally. The second thing is to move after you've eaten. And the third thing is to think about how much the order in which you eat your food, or just having a small salad before you eat your food, because that can make a real difference.
Could you share a sugar-free recipe with us? Comes perhaps if they want something like a dessert type sort of recipe.
Yeah, so there's some simple things like, if you made like protein balls, for example, using dates, you can use dates with some cashew nuts and a little bit of cacao powder, and whiz that up in a blender and turn them into little balls. Yeah. That's like having a little chocolate, a sweet chocolate ball after you've eaten, but it doesn't have any sugar in. that's a really important thing to be aware there of. Dried fruits do have quite high sugar concentration, but if you combine them with more protein, like the cashew nuts, for example, that will slow the release of the sugar down from the dates. So the combination of those two together. So if you were having fruit, for example, have it with some peanut butter or have it with a handful of almonds or something like that. Protein will always slow the release of the glucose down from the carbohydrate. Yeah, for sure.
Would so yogurt, would that count as a protein, or should we watch some of the sugars and
So with yogurt, always be aware of, don't go low fat, because if they take a food group out of something, they will always add sugar to it. So if they take the fat out, they'll add sugar to it. So a low fat yogurt is actually really detrimental from a weight management point of view, from a blood sugar balance point of view. We've been told for years that low fat, low calorie is the way we need to go. But actually, in reality, the way we need to go is level blood sugars. That's the first place to start if we want to manage our weight, for example. So if you are having yogurt post your meal time as a dessert, for example, I would always go full fat. For some people, that's really hard to get their head around because they think fat equates to putting weight on. But fat doesn't have a relationship with insulin, so we don't release insulin when we consume a full fat yogurt, for example. And there's going to be far less sugar in that full fat. Ideally, you'd go with Greek, full fat Greek, proper Greek yogurt, not the Greek style yogurt that tends to be blended. It's not real.
And goats or sheep's yogurt.
Yeah, goats and sheep's yogurt.
You can get that in the UK. It might seem a little bit weird. I'm not sure.
No, we do get it, and it's fabulous. I think goats and sheep's yogurt are a great solution as well. But go full fat, and then just buy. Again, I would say to clients, buy some frozen blueberries and strawberries, cook them up in a compote, keep that in the fridge for a few days, and just use a couple of tablespoons of that on your full fat natural yogurt, whichever it is, whether it's Greek, whether it's goats, whether it's sheep. And that makes a great dessert without needing to add any sugar to it. I wouldn't put sugar into the compote either. I would just cook it up and let it cook. And that's a much better yogurt dessert than buying a yogurt that has sugar in it and all sorts of things in it. So there are always ways around. There's always solutions. And ideally what we want to do is reduce someone's need for sweetness. So again, in an ideal world, what I would be saying to my clients is, once you've eaten your meal, if you feel like you need something sweet, go and move for 10 minutes and then come back and see if you actually need anything sweet or not. Because often it's a habit.
That you want something sweet. That's very interesting.
Yeah.
I must admit that I struggle with that. After dinner time, I do enjoy, some dark chocolate.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with that. A couple of squares of dark chocolate. And I hold my hand up and say, I call myself the sugar-free coach, but I'm not 100% sugar-free. I will have, little bits of good quality dark chocolate. If it's a birthday, for example, and there's a nice cake, I will have a slice of cake. So I'm not someone who says, you've got to give it up completely. It's more about just understanding how the body responds to sugar, how the body responds from an insulin perspective, and then what insulin does in terms of impacting our hormone balance, our ability to be able to manage our weight, our IBS, for example, our sleep quality. Insulin is such a dominant hormone. And when you understand the impact that that insulin has in the body, it's much easier to make a decision to go, actually, I'm not going to consume that because I know it's going to not make me feel great.
Exactly. It's knowing how it'll affect you.
Yeah.
How you will feel.
Yeah, for sure.
If you're not going to feel well, and for example, I know that if I have something sugary at night, I'll wake up in the morning and I'll have like this fuzzy thinking, my brain, I'm not.
Yeah. You feel like you have a hangover.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
and that's the impact of sugar on the liver and the liver's inability to be able to clear the sugar as quickly and as efficiently as it should be.
It should, yeah. Can you talk about the importance of maybe a balanced and diverse diet in maintaining good health?
Yeah, I mean, I would always be, it's an interesting word, isn't it? Moderation or balance, kind of what is that moderation? What does it look like? And that's why I would say, I won't say that I'm 100% sugar free, because I do enjoy, I like the taste of sugar. Um, we all do. So it's about knowing how to manage that. From a balanced diet perspective, I would always be encouraging clients to really keep a record of how food makes them feel. So some foods will be fine for one person, not for the next. So for example, I can't eat oranges without them, they will spike my blood sugars, whereas the next person might be able to eat oranges for days and it doesn't affect them. So always, as far as our diet is concerned, is I would always be looking at least a quarter of the plate, if not a third of the plate, full of some good quality protein. And then I would look at all the colours for a good at least half of the plate, and then a small bit of carbohydrate in the beige form, as in potatoes, pastas, that kind of thing. So rather than obsessing over calories and how much something weighs and that kind of thing, what I say to my clients is just fill your plate full of colours. If you fill your plate full of colours, if you don't worry about calorie content or macros or micros or anything like that, just have some good quality protein and lots of colours. That is the first step in the right direction to improving your long-term well-being, for sure.
Definitely. In closing, what advice would you give to someone who's just starting their sugar-free journey?
So I would always say, create a kind of structure for your day. So plan your meals essentially, so that you know what you're going to have. Spend a bit of time before you start going down that sugar journey, spend a bit of time just working out what foods work for you and how they make you feel. So maybe 5 days or so. Did this breakfast work for me in terms of keeping my blood sugars balanced, getting me from one meal to the next? If it didn't, then I need to switch it up or I need to tweak it, that kind of thing. Don't overwhelm yourself, but always start really simply with, I'm going to start with my breakfast, and then gradually build it up after that. And really keep a record of how foods make you feel, because you might find something that really works for you for breakfast. And then you think, right, okay, great. So I'll use a really good example, a client who was using porridge and seeds and nuts for her breakfast, and it was keeping her full all morning, no problem at all. And then she added some blueberries to it, and just the simple addition of the blueberries spiked her blood sugars, and she was hungry by 10:30. So you really need to kind of scratch beneath the surface and work out what works for you. And when you work out what works for you, it's empowering, because you can then you make choices around your own personal health, rather than what a diet plan or a kind of a food industry might tell us that we should be eating. And when you get to grips with that, it doesn't take long to get to grips with it. Usually 10 days to 2 weeks of just keeping a record of the food that you've eaten and how it's made you feel. That can really empower you to make some changes going forward. And just listen to what your body's telling you. Most of us have lost track of the messages that our body's telling us. We don't listen to our body. If we listen to our body and how hungry we feel after a meal, it will give us an indication of whether it's spiked our blood sugars or not.
It truly, that's an excellent approach to take, I think, especially when it comes to diet, to be as personalized and customized as much as possible.
Yeah.
Trying to copy paste a certain diet for everyone just doesn't work.
No. I always say to clients, focus on nutrients rather than calories. If you want to diet, just focus on the amount of nutrients and the amount of colours you've got on your plate, and stop worrying about the calories, because the calories doesn't work. It really doesn't work.
It's not sustainable.
No.
To count your calories or measure and weigh your meals day in, day out,
it's miserable.
It is miserable. I don't think I could do that.
No, me neither. And that was, again, another reason why I created the program that I did, because I knew that by healing my health I wasn't going to be able to focus on calories, and I wasn't going to be able to focus on weighing things and that kind of thing. I just needed to focus on something that was simple. I've got 3 children. I had a business to run. I didn't want to be, I didn't want to be focusing on things that made it complicated for me.
No, you can't. It wouldn't work.
No.
So if our audience would like to get in touch with you, could you share your website or your socials?
Yeah, it's dead easy. I'm thesugarfreecoach.com, all one word, thesugarfreecoach.com. And on social media, I am Sue Thomas _ the Sugar Free Coach. So yeah, as long as you remember the Sugar Free Coach bit, you can find my socials on my website as well.
Well, it was lovely having you on the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Barbara. Really, really, really had enjoyed chatting with you.
Yes, it was my pleasure.
Thanks for listening to Barbara's podcast. Don't forget to sign up for our newsletter or e-courses. Celebrate life, and see you at the next episode.